The American novelist Leif Anger published his debut novel, Peace Like a River, in September 2001, 2 days before 9/11. It went on to sell more than 1 million copies and was acclaimed the best book of the year by numerous critics. It's been a perennial bestseller ever since. The novel begins in the delivery room when Anger was born in 1951. His lungs refused to kick in, and despite the doctor's increasingly desperate efforts to get him breathing, nothing seemed to work. Eventually, after 12 minutes of effort, the doctor laid the infant on a table and said that nothing more could be done. Then Leif's father rushed into the room, picked up his son, and ordered him to breathe. Nothing happened. His father then took off his coat, wrapped his son in it, and said, "In the name of the living God, I am telling you to breathe." At which point, Anger began breathing. What enabled Anger to begin breathing? Reflecting on that incident many years later, Anger says, "The answer, it seems to me now, lies in the miracles." He goes on to explain what he means by miracles. He writes, "Let me say something about that word miracle. For too long, it's been used to characterize things or events that, though pleasant, are entirely normal. Peeping chicks at Easter time, spring generally, a clear sunrise after an overcast week. A miracle, people say, as if they've been educated from greeting cards. I'm sorry, but nope. Such things are worth our notice every day of the week, but to call them miracles evaporates the strength of the word." He continues, "Real miracles bother people, like strange sudden pains unknown in medical literature. It's true, they rebut every rule all we good citizens take comfort in. My sister Swede, who often sees to the nub, offered this: people fear miracles because they fear being changed, though ignoring them will change you also." I thought of this story and the wise insight of Anger's sister Swede when I heard that novelist and essayist Dennis Covington died 2 weeks ago at the age of 75. Author of 2 novels and 4 books of nonfiction, Covington's book Salvation on Sand Mountain was a finalist for the National Book Award. The book, based on real events, also played a formative role in my own view of how transformative experiences come into our lives. In 1991, a snake-handling preacher in Scottsboro, Alabama, named Glendale Buford Summerford, tried to murder his wife. He forced her at gunpoint to stick her arm into a box full of rattlesnakes. Covington, then a journalist for the New York Times, went to Alabama to cover Summerford's trial for attempted murder. Intrigued by this juxtaposition of reptiles and religion, Covington stayed on to write a book about snake handling and redemption in southern Appalachia, which he titled Salvation on Sand Mountain. The first time Covington visited Summerford's church was a cool evening in March of 1992. As Covington describes the scene, the sky over Sand Mountain on the far side of Scottsboro was the color of apricots, and a thin silver crescent moon had just risen into the evening sky. As Covington approached, he wondered if the dilapidated building was really a church at all. It looked like an old gas station and country store. But then Covington saw the miniature steeple and heard the music. It sounded like nothing he had ever heard before, he says, a cross between a Salvation Army band and a rock concert. The cacophony of tambourines and electric guitar, drums and cymbals provided jarring counterpoint to voices that careened dangerously from one note to another. As Covington stood outside the door of the tiny church, he hesitated for a brief moment. He writes, and for me, these are the wisest words in the book. There are moments when you stand on the brink of a new experience and understand that you have no choice about it. Either you walk into the experience or you turn away from it, but you know that no matter what you choose, you will have altered your life in a permanent way. Either way, there will be consequences. Since Covington went on to write the book, you already know the next sentence. I walked on in. In that church and others like it, Covington discovered a tradition of religious mysticism in which people cast out demons, speak in tongues, drink strychnine, run blowtorches up and down their arms, and drape themselves with rattlesnakes. Summerford's church was called the Church of Jesus Christ with Signs Following. In this tradition, the ability to remain unpoisoned by strychnine and unburned by a blowtorch and unbitten by a rattlesnake is a sign that your faith is strong and your convictions are sure. If your faith is weak, then the blowtorches burn your flesh and the rattlers strike you down. Whether you choose to take the risk and put your faith to the test, or choose to play it safe and walk away, there will be consequences. Reverend Summerford was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison. While the trial was about murder, Covington says, the way of life he discovered was about facing fear, having faith, and taking risks. In the book, Covington describes how his own life story ends up interwoven with the story of Summerford and his church. If you're so inclined, the book is well worth reading. My interest this morning is the experience of facing fear, having faith, and taking risks, and the role miracles play in such an experience. W.H. Auden's poem, Leap Before You Look, which served as our reading for the morning, begins with this warning when approaching such matters. The sense of danger must not disappear. The way is certainly both short and steep, however gradual it looks from here. Look if you like, but you will have to leap. Auden ends the poem with the line, our dream of safety has to disappear. The word miracle originally had nothing to do with events that contravened the law of nature. It referred to something that was amazing or wondrous, astonishing to behold. Over the centuries, as the Christian tradition increasingly insisted that divine revelation does contravene the laws of nature, and as Enlightenment science increasingly insisted otherwise, miracles developed an identity crisis. Some people believe miracles occur when the laws of nature don't apply. Jesus of Nazareth rising from the dead, for example. Others apply the term to events that, as Leif Anger puts it, are pleasant but entirely normal. A baby chick at Easter, for example, or a flower in springtime. For my part, I'm not satisfied with either explanation. I believe miracles occur when our lives are transformed in ways that are both unnecessary in the scientific sense and unpredictable in the spiritual sense. Miracles happen when, as Covington puts it, you stand on the brink of a new experience and understand you have no choice about it. Either you walk into the experience or you turn away from it, but you know that no matter what you choose, you will have altered your life in a permanent way. A miracle takes place when, despite danger, risk, and uncertainty, you take the leap anyway. Once in a while, something amazing happens, something you could never have planned or predicted. These moments typically come when you stand at a crossroad. It may involve beginning a new relationship or ending an established one, staying the course in a job or heading off in a new direction, getting help with an addiction or succumbing yet again. Whatever you choose, your life in the future will be permanently transformed, either by the knowledge that you failed to find the courage or by the exhilaration of knowing you took the leap. The issue is not about outcome, whether taking the risk turned out well. Rather, the issue is whether you responded courageously to the challenge life posed to you. It's knowing that you stood up to life and didn't let it run you over. Dennis Covington wrote a short essay in 2017 for the American Scholar describing a moment early in his career when he was living in Alabama. He had ended up divorced, out of work, and bankrupt. He eventually got a new job teaching in West Texas. When his younger daughter joined him there, he could no longer afford to pay the rent in his apartment. So he found an abandoned farmhouse on the edge of a canyon 50 miles from the university. He says, "Our water pipes often froze, and we occasionally had rattlesnakes in the living room, scorpions that fell onto us from the ceiling while we slept, and propane leaks in the kitchen that could have blown us to smithereens. These were adventures, to be sure, but every one of them was worth the silence." He goes on to describe the birds and mammals that kept them company and the Milky Way that stretched out above them at night, full length, full strength, and terrifying. He says, "We became part of it. It was ours. Day or night, our home was there in the sky." He concludes the essay by saying, "I never would have believed that I'd have to go bankrupt and find paradise with my daughter in an abandoned farmhouse in the flattest place on earth, West Texas. Who'd have picked that out of a tourist brochure?" It's not that we found ourselves in paradise, though. It's that paradise was where we found ourselves. Covington's observation about paradise may sound like a koan, one of those paradoxical riddles used to demonstrate the limits of logical thinking. To the contrary, it captures a deeply insightful moment of enlightenment. For my part, I take him to be saying that paradise is not a place you happen to discover in the geographical sense. Rather, it's wherever you happen to be when you find yourself in the existential sense. All of humanity's great stories of self-discovery, among them Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Cervantes' Don Quixote, Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, Pearl Buck's The Time is Noon, and Alice Walker's The Color Purple. All of them require taking risks and suffering hardship. As Bunyan puts it, "Come, pluck up, heart, let's neither faint nor fear. Better, though difficult, the right way to go, than wrong, though easy, where the end is woe." Once in a while, despite our most valiant efforts to live a life of comfort and ease, we end up confronting an unavoidable choice. We can either lose ourselves in what's safe and predictable, or we can find ourselves in what's risky and uncertain. Sometimes, in order to find ourselves, we have to leap. Amen. I love you. May God bless us all.